My name is Helen Matthews, 72 years old, retired librarian, widow of 47 years, to a man who taught me that quiet isn't weakness. I live in a pale yellow house with creaky floors, one cat, and more peace than most people can handle. That's how I like it. The story really began on a Tuesday morning when the phone rang and my peace answered it. Mom, my son David said, voice tight. Vanessa wants to talk to you. That tone, the kind men use when they're standing between two storms. Put her on, I said. A second later, her voice spilled through the receiver, quick and bright like a commercial. Helen, I'm so glad you picked up. Listen, I have a huge favor. My company's sending me to Miami for a training. Only a few days. I figured you could watch the kids. You don't do much these days, right? Just like that, you don't do much. My hand tightened around the mug. How many days? 3, she said. Maybe 4, depends on flights. I'll leave Friday morning. And David? Oh, he's got work. He'll come home late. You'll have them most of the day. It'll be fun. They love you, and it'll give you something to do. I could almost hear her smile through the phone, the one she used when she'd already decided something. Of course, I said evenly. Bring them by Thursday night. We'll make pancakes for breakfast Friday. Perfect, she chirped. You're the best, Helen. I knew I could count on you. She hung up before I could say what I was thinking, that counting on someone is different from using them. The rest of the week went by quietly. I aired out the guest room, washed the sheets with lavender, stocked the fridge with apple juice and tiny yogurts. I've been a mother long enough to know children run better on routine and snacks. Thursday evening, a minivan pulled into the driveway. Mia, 7, and Leo, 5, tumbled out like puppies. I opened my arms. There's my heartbeats, I said, and they ran straight into them. Behind them came Vanessa in heels too high for the gravel. She looked perfect, of course. Hair sleek, luggage coordinated, phone glued to her palm. Thank you again, she said, brushing air kisses near my cheek. Their tablets are in the bag, and there's a list of their bedtime routines. Don't worry about meals, just keep them happy. I always do, I said. She glanced at her watch. Flight's early. Gotta run. She waved at the kids. Be good for Grandma. Love you. Then she slid into the van and was gone before the taillights reached the street. Mia tugged my sleeve. Can we have spaghetti? Already planned, I said. We cooked, we laughed, we read a story about dragons. By bedtime, the house hummed with a tired kind of joy. I tucked them in and stood for a moment, watching them breathe in sync. Children sleep like forgiveness. Friday morning started like any other. Sunlight on the curtains, the smell of coffee and toast, cartoons low on the TV. I checked my phone around 10. No message from Vanessa. No call. That wasn't unusual. At noon, I got a text, flight delayed, might land tomorrow instead. Can you handle one more night? A smiley face at the end, as if that made it polite. Of course, I typed back, because what else could I say? The kids were happy, and I'd promised. Saturday morning, another message. Company added a meeting Monday. Just 2 extra days. Thanks again, you're amazing. 2 days had become 4, like laundry that multiplies when you're not looking. I made pancakes again, played hide and seek, patched Leo's knee when he fell in the yard. I didn't mind the work. I minded the assumption. Every time my phone buzzed, it was another cheerful instruction. Never a question. Never a thank you. By Sunday evening, my back ached, but my mind was sharp as ever. While the kids napped, I looked at the fridge calendar and did the math. She'd left Thursday. The few days were already half a week. I poured myself tea and sat by the window, the same window where my husband used to read the paper. You'd tell me to say something, I murmured, to draw a line. He would. He'd always said a boundary isn't rudeness, it's self-respect with good posture. Monday came. No Vanessa, just another text at dawn. Hey, Helen. Small change. Conference extended. Back Friday. You're a lifesaver. Lifesaver. Like I was a flotation device instead of a person. I stared at the message, the words flickering in the early light. A strange calm came over me, the kind that means you're done being polite about the wrong things. I didn't reply. I started my plan instead. I called my son. David, I said, how's work? Busy. Why? Your wife's in Miami till Friday. Did you know that? He hesitated. She mentioned maybe staying longer. Mom, are you okay with the kids? I'm fine with the kids, I said, but I'm not fine with the story she's telling herself about me. What story? That I do nothing. That my time belongs to her just because I'm old. Mom, I'm not angry, I said gently. I'm organizing, he sighed. That tone scares me more than anger. It should, I said, smiling. I'll handle it. That night, after the children were asleep, I made a list on notepaper, the same way I used to catalog books. At the top, I wrote Operation Respect. Underneath, 3 steps. Protect the kids. They're innocent. Keep their days happy and safe. Teach through truth, not temper. When she gets back, remind her what doing nothing looks like and what doing something feels like. I folded the paper neatly, slid it under the magnet on the fridge, and poured myself another cup of tea. The cat jumped onto the counter, tail flicking. Yes, Muffin, I said. Grandma's about to make her move. Outside, the moon climbed over the pines, pale and patient, the way justice sometimes is. By Tuesday morning, my house had a new soundtrack. It wasn't the radio or the old clock that insists on chiming a minute late. It was the rhythm of small feet and cereal spoons and questions that arrive in threes. Every room wore childhood like sunshine. Mia woke first, whispering to her dolls like a coach before a big game. Leo followed, hair sticking up like he'd been fighting dragons in his sleep. We ate toast in our pajamas and decided pancakes should be a weekend thing, not a daily ceremony. The cat approved. Muffin only approves of routines that keep crumbs within reach. After breakfast, we drew maps. Pirate Islands, treasure under the maple tree, an X that meant more cookies than I intended to allow. I let the morning run wild and then steered it back into calm with a stack of library books I'd been saving. The good ones still have that certain paper smell, the kind that tells you stories are not screens and never will be. My phone buzzed on the counter. A photo blinked to life for a second before the screen dimmed. Palm trees, a pool, legs in a lounge chair that could only belong to someone on company time. A message followed, bright as a sticker. Kids okay? Hotel is beautiful. Don't forget to do Mia's hair in a high pony. TX. I did not forget Mia's hair. I forgot to reply. We spent the afternoon in the yard. I showed them how to look for four-leaf clovers, how to listen for the wind at the top of the trees instead of the noise at your own feet. Leo asked if the clouds ever crash into each other. I told him sometimes they do, and that's what thunder is. Sky deciding it needs to speak up. He nodded, like he'd suspected as much. Vanessa's messages came in little bursts. One asked if I could introduce more vegetables. Another reminded me to limit screen time to 30 minutes. A third suggested I try her kid yoga playlist, which I dutifully did for exactly one song until the cat decided our downward dogs were a personal attack. I kept the phone face down after that and watched the children instead. They are better notifications. That evening, after baths and story and 2 sips of water that were really just a way to delay bedtime, I settled into my chair with a mug and let the quiet find me. The house smelled of shampoo and laundry and the faint sweetness of apples. I thought about the word babysitting. It always sounded wrong to me. I wasn't sitting anything. I was holding a whole small world steady. Near midnight, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a picture. It was a command dressed like a favor. Hey, Helen, can you swing by David's tomorrow to pick up their soccer cleats? He's working late. You don't mind. Those last 3 words. You don't mind. I could feel the tilt of them all the way down my spine. I placed the phone beside my cup and watched steam curl upward, thin as a decision. In the morning, we ate oatmeal with honey and counted how many blue jays we could spot from the porch. I told Mia a story about when her father was 7 and tried to build a raft out of fence boards. We both agreed he had always been brave in a direction that needed supervision. I packed the kids in the car and drove into town. We picked up the cleats and stopped at the park, where swings told the truth about how fast children can fly without leaving the ground. I watched them take turns without being coached and felt a small pride bloom where worry usually sits. On the way home, I pulled into the grocery store for fruit and milk. Near the checkout line, I ran into Ruth, who always finds me when I need finding. She looked at the cart, then at my face. You're running a summer camp, she said, smiling. It's a good camp, I said. Just one the owner didn't register me for. She leaned on the cart handle and lowered her voice. How's the traveler? Happy, I said, and very invested in ponytails and cleats. Ruth's eyes softened. You keeping your line? I am, I said. And they're keeping theirs. They're children. They know how to be themselves. She squeezed my arm and tossed a pack of stickers into our cart when the kids weren't looking. Emergency currency, she whispered. Back at the house, we ate strawberries on the porch and turned the stickers into a reward system I pretended I'd invented on the spot. They loved it. The cat did not. She wore a star on her collar until she remembered pride and shook it off. After lunch, I put on soft music and let the living room become a nap. Mia drifted first, Leo second. The phone buzzed again on the table, louder in a quiet room. I silenced it with a finger and looked at their faces, open and honest in sleep. I took a breath and let my plan tick forward one small notch. When they woke, it was time to go look for frogs at the creek. I told them we couldn't keep any. Leo wanted to name them anyway. He named the same frog 4 things in under a minute. It didn't seem to mind. By evening, we were tired in the right way. The good dishes went back in the cabinet. The table wore crumb trails like bracelets. I wiped everything down and thought about what comes next when patience has done its job and still hasn't been thanked. The next day behaved itself until 3 o'clock. That was when the message arrived without a question mark. Extending to next week, Tuesday or Wednesday latest, big opportunity, you'll be fine, you love the kids. Love was not the issue. Love had done laps around every room of this house and still had breath left. Respect was the one limping at the gate. I called David. He answered on the second ring, voice packed with everything at once. Mom, I need to know if you knew about next week. I found out an hour ago, he said. I'm sorry. I know, I said. This isn't on you. It's just time to balance the scales. He was quiet a moment. What are you going to do? Something small, I said. Something true. That night, after story time, Mia slipped her hand into mine and whispered that I smell like vanilla. I told her that was because the cookie jar is a more powerful perfume than people realize. She laughed into her pillow and fell asleep with crumb evidence on her mind, which is the best kind. I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and a little stack of recipe cards that never complain about being repurposed. I wrote a note in my neat librarian script, the same careful letters I used on book labels for decades. I dated it, I signed it, I folded it and tucked it into an envelope. Then I placed the envelope beside the landline as if it had always belonged there. In the morning, I started early. I made sure the kids had a normal breakfast and extra hugs. I packed a bag with snacks, a change of clothes, their favorite stories, and the little frog names we'd invented. During cartoons, I stepped into the bedroom and dialed a number David had given me years ago and I'd never used. The front desk of Vanessa's office answered on the second ring. Good morning, I said, soft and professional. May I speak to the director who coordinates travel for the leadership training group? I'll hold. I held long enough to fold a dish towel twice and straighten the fridge magnets into a little parade. When the right voice arrived, I introduced myself. I kept it short. I told the truth. I said a grandmother was caring for 2 children while their mother attended a training that had extended again and again, and that the mother's messages made it clear she believed elder care equals endless availability. I said the children were fine and safe, but that respect matters as much as deadlines. I wasn't angry. I wasn't dramatic. I was a sentence that did not need a second draft. The voice on the other end got quiet. Then it asked me to repeat the part about the extension. When I did, it apologized for the inconvenience and said, we weren't aware of the childcare situation at home. The tone changed enough for me to picture a pen being uncapped with intent. I thanked them for listening and said I hoped their training produced leaders who understood that families are not luggage. Then I hung up and poured orange juice like nothing had moved but a conversation. By mid-morning, the phone began to behave like a kettle on a forgotten burner. Messages, then a call, then another. I let it ring. Children were coloring planets, and Saturn needed its rings just so. Finally, I answered. Vanessa did not start with hello. Did you call my office? I called a person, I said. I told them the truth. You made me look irresponsible. You did that yourself, I said gently. I just held up a mirror. There was breathing on the other end that wanted to become words but hadn't chosen which yet. I waited. Waiting is a skill they should teach in schools. You can't just... I can, I said, and I did. The children are safe and happy, but I am not invisible, and my time is not your emergency exit. She was quiet long enough for me to hear the kids arguing over a crayon. I covered the receiver and played judge without leaving my chair. One crayon, two artists, a timer, problem solved. When I returned, her voice had softened half a shade. They told me to wrap it up by Friday. Good, I said. That was the original agreement, remember? I remember a favor, she muttered. Favors have edges, I said. You crossed them. She exhaled hard. I'll be home Friday. Drop off was Thursday, I said. So Friday will feel longer than it should. We'll be ready. I hung up and stared at the phone until the screen went black and returned to being a small mirror that doesn't lie about who's holding it. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't triumphant. I felt the way a room feels when someone finally opens a window. The next 2 days behaved. We baked banana bread and called it breakfast, in a tone that suggested no one should argue with grandmothers about such matters. We built a fort out of 2 chairs and a sheet and decided it was a library, because of course it was. In the afternoons, we wrote postcards to ourselves and mailed them from the box at the corner. Mia drew a picture of the house and put a tiny heart over every window. Leo put a heart over the cat. Each night, once they were asleep and the house returned to its honest creaks, I reread the note I'd written and changed nothing. It wasn't for Vanessa. It was for me. It reminded me that love keeps you soft and boundaries keep you whole, and that the trick is to let both live in the same skin. Friday morning came with a sky that couldn't decide if it would be blue or gray. We decided for it with pancakes and extra syrup. The kids helped me pack their things without fuss. Mia tucked her doll into the bag like a goodbye that only takes a minute. Leo made sure the frog names were safe. Around noon, the minivan turned into the driveway, too fast for my taste. The engine cut off like a sentence that doesn't get the last word. The door opened. Vanessa stepped out in travel clothes that cost more than my first car. She looked at the house, then at me, then at the children who had already launched themselves toward her legs with joyful noise that doesn't care about adult weather. She hugged them, kissed the tops of their hair, and whispered that she missed them. They told her about frogs and forts and banana bread that counts as breakfast. She laughed and promised to make some at home, though we both knew the oven would stay as clean as it had been when she left. Inside, I handed her the bag, then the cleats, then the little pile of drawings that would absolutely get bent in the car. She thanked me quickly and looked toward the door, eager to leave the scene of the lesson. Before you go, I said, there's something on the table for you. She saw the envelope by the landline and blinked at the neat letters. She opened it without sitting down, stood there in my kitchen, and read it twice. Her face changed in the second reading. Just a little, but enough. She looked up. I kept my hands folded so I wouldn't smooth what didn't need smoothing. You wrote this the night you called. It wasn't a question. I did, I said. She folded the note carefully, which was new for her, respect touching paper. She tucked it into her bag and adjusted the strap like a woman getting ready to carry something heavier but better. Thank you, she said, and the words surprised us both by sounding sincere. You're welcome, I said. Bring them next weekend. Ask first. I will, she answered, and I'll bring dinner. You'll bring a list of what you plan to bring, I said, and we both almost smiled. She gathered the children and moved toward the door. At the threshold, Mia turned back and ran into my arms the way only a 7-year-old can. Fast, full-bodied, certain. Bye, Grandma. We'll come back soon. I know you will, I said into her hair. I'll have the library ready. Leo saluted me with a crayon he had no business still holding. Bye, Captain, I saluted back. Goodbye, Lieutenant. The door closed. The van rolled away, this time slower. The sound faded down the street and gave the walls back to me. I stood there for a long breath and then another, hand on the frame like a person who's just learned they can lean on their own house again. The phone buzzed on the table. A message from David. Home safe. Thank you. You okay? I typed back that I was, and that the children were, and that maybe, finally, the grown-ups were learning too. Then I put the phone face down and went to the porch. Rain had decided on the sky's behalf. It came steady, kind, the sort that makes everything smell like hope. I let it fall while the cat inspected the empty hallway and decided it was hers again. In the quiet, my plan settled into place, and I felt the next chapter lift its head. I had not raised my voice. I had not asked permission to be respected. I had simply told the truth in a room that needed it. And the house, faithful as ever, expanded to fit the new air. Friday ended with soup and a slice of banana bread that tasted better than it had any right to. I slept like a person who had put something back where it belonged. Morning would bring the breaking point or the beginning of repair. Either way, I knew how to hold the center. Because I am old, yes. Idle, never. Saturday morning arrived dressed in quiet sunlight, the kind that pretends nothing ever happened. I poured coffee and told myself that calm was a choice, not a reward. The children's laughter still floated faintly through the house. Echoes in the curtains, fingerprints on the fridge, crumbs in the corners. It was good noise, the kind that leaves a mark but not a wound. Still, the silence afterward was its own kind of heavy. Around 9, the phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen, expecting maybe David, but no. It was her, Vanessa. Her tone was as chipper as always, like the week had been a picnic. Helen, thank you again for everything. I owe you one. Oh, and since the kids are off school next week, maybe we could keep them with you a few more days? They love it there. It's so peaceful. I stared at the words, peaceful. The irony could have filled a library. I didn't reply right away. I set the phone down and let the moment breathe. Then I called David. Did you see your wife's message? I asked. He sighed. Mom, she mentioned it. Said it might be easier since she's got a project deadline. Easier for who? I asked softly. He hesitated. For everyone, I guess. Not for me, I said. And not for her. Once she learns that convenience has an expiration date. The rest of the morning went by in slow, deliberate movements. Dishes stacked, laundry folded, house straightened like a woman preparing for a storm she's already forecasted. Around noon, I opened my notebook and wrote one sentence. She'll call again when she realizes silence is the only answer left. By evening, she did. Hi, Helen, she said, her voice dipped in honey but carrying the sting of panic. Hey, just checking. Did you get my text? I did, I said. And? I read it, I replied, a pause. Then sharper. So you'll take them, right? No, I said simply. The line went so quiet I could hear her breathing, quick and uneven. Excuse me? I said no, I repeated. Not this time. Her disbelief cracked through the phone. You're joking. You love being with them. I love them, I corrected. There's a difference. You're really going to leave me stranded like this? You're not stranded, I said. You're responsible. That's what this is, responsibility coming home to you. You can't do this to me, she snapped. I'm not doing anything to you, I said. I'm doing something for me. And I hung up before she could fill the air with more noise. The next day came with an unexpected visitor. David standing on my porch looking like a man torn between two loyalties that shouldn't have to compete. Mom, he said, she's upset. She says you embarrassed her at work. I didn't embarrass her, I said, letting him in. I corrected a misunderstanding, one she wrote herself. She feels like you're trying to teach her a lesson. I am, I said plainly, one I wish someone had taught me earlier in life, that love without boundaries turns into exhaustion disguised as generosity. He sat at the kitchen table, running his hands through his hair. She's hard to reason with right now. She's not used to being told no. That's the problem, I said. No one's ever told her no before, so she thinks it's cruelty when it's really clarity. He didn't argue. He looked at the familiar coffee mug in front of him, his father's old one, and I saw something shift behind his eyes. Maybe memory, maybe understanding. She'll be home tonight, he said finally. Good, I said. Tell her she can come by tomorrow. I'll have the kettle on. Sunday came with thunderclouds rolling low. The air felt thick, like even the weather was holding its breath. Around 2, her car pulled into the driveway. She didn't slam the door this time, but she still walked like someone carrying an invisible argument. I opened the door before she knocked. Come in, Vanessa. She did, slow but steady. She wore guilt like perfume, strong at first, then fading into awkward politeness. I guess you're angry, she said, arms folded. I don't get angry about predictable things, I said. I just stopped participating in them. She frowned. You could have just said you were tired. I did, I said. Every time I agreed to something I didn't want to. That was me saying I was tired, in a language you ignored. She looked down, her confidence peeling away. I didn't mean to take advantage. I just thought, you had time. I have time, I said, but not for disrespect. There's a difference. Her voice cracked slightly. I really thought you liked helping. I do. I said. Helping, not replacing. There's a fine line, and you crossed it with a suitcase in each hand. Vanessa looked away, blinking too fast. The silence between us grew heavy, not angry, just full of truth. Finally, she asked, "What do you want me to say?" "Nothing," I said. "Just mean what you do say from now on." She nodded slowly, the first real nod of understanding I'd seen from her since the day she married my son. I didn't realize how much I assumed. "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize yet," I said. "Show me you understand." She looked confused. "How?" "By planning your own week," I said. "By finding help without turning love into labor. By remembering that grandparents are blessings, not built-in babysitters." She swallowed, nodded again. "You're right," she said quietly. "I know," I said. That night after she left, the storm finally broke. Rain against the windows, thunder rolling like an old hymn. I sat by the window with my tea, watching the lightning flash in the distance. It didn't scare me. It sounded like punctuation. The breaking point had passed. The house felt lighter, as if the walls themselves understood that peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the refusal to let someone else control your volume. Tomorrow, I thought, we'd see what healing sounds like. And with that, I turned off the lamp, listening as the storm washed the dust from the world, one clap of thunder at a time. Monday morning came quiet, like even the birds were watching to see what I'd do next. The air smelled like wet earth and new beginnings, that soft scent that always follows a storm. I made tea, took it to the porch, and sat in my husband's old chair, the one that still leaned just a bit to the right. I liked it that way. It reminded me that not everything needs fixing to be steady. I had been thinking all night about what to do, not to punish, not to humiliate, but to teach. Teaching is a habit that never leaves you, even after retirement. My move needed to be calm, simple, and unforgettable. The phone rang at 9 sharp. I didn't even have to check the name. "Morning, Helen," Vanessa said, voice carefully balanced between casual and cautious. "Listen, about yesterday. I just wanted to thank you for understanding. Things got out of hand and—" "Vanessa," I said gently, interrupting her apology before it started looping. "I appreciate the words, but we both know understanding isn't the issue. It's follow-through." There was a pause. "You're right," she said softly. "I don't want it to be like this between us." "Neither do I replied. "But words without change are just air. So let's build something real." I told her to come by later that afternoon. "Bring your planner," I said, "and your honesty." She laughed nervously. "Should I be scared?" "No," I said, "just ready." She arrived at 4. The sun was warm and sharp, slicing through the curtains. She wore a gray suit. Maybe she thought looking professional would give her the upper hand. I admired the effort. I'd already set the table with 2 mugs of tea, a small notebook, and a manila envelope. She glanced at it immediately, her curiosity flickering like a cat spotting a shadow. "What's that?" she asked. "You'll see," I said, motioning for her to sit. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The house hummed with old peace. Then I leaned forward and began. "You know, when your children were here last week, they asked a lot of questions. Not about toys, not about rules, about you. They missed you, and that's natural. But what struck me was how much they admire you. They think you can do anything." Her eyes softened. "That's sweet." "It is," I said, "and I'd like to help them keep believing it. That's why I'm making a small change." I slid the envelope toward her. Inside were 3 sheets of paper, neatly typed. She pulled them out, confusion knitting her brow. "Babysitting agreement," she read aloud, her tone halfway between disbelief and a laugh. "Yes," I said simply. "A courtesy document. I thought if I'm going to be the reliable helper you lean on, we should make it official. Schedule, compensation, clear boundaries." "You're a professional, Vanessa. I thought you'd appreciate clarity." She blinked at me, then down at the paper. I could see the color rise slowly in her cheeks. "You're serious?" "Very," I said. "I'm happy to help occasionally, but my time is worth something too. Not money necessarily, but respect. And this ensures we both understand that." She scanned the page again. I watched her eyes trace the lines I'd written in my neat librarian typewriter font. "All childcare must be requested at least 72 hours in advance. Duration not to exceed 3 days unless mutually agreed upon. Verbal appreciation required. At least one sincere thank you per visit. Overnight stays come with 1 jar of local honey and a promise not to say you do nothing ever again." Her lips twitched, fighting between laughter and embarrassment. This is a contract? She asked finally. A covenant, I corrected, between two adults who love the same family. For a long time, she didn't speak. Then she said quietly, I didn't realize how badly I'd been treating you. I know you didn't, I said. That's the point of writing things down. Paper holds truth longer than memory does. Her voice cracked. You really think I'd just use you? I don't think you meant to, I said gently. But you did, because convenience can be louder than conscience. She nodded, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. I deserved this. No, I said, you deserve the chance to see it. She set the papers down carefully. Helen, I can't believe you went through all this trouble just to remind you I'm alive, I said, smiling softly. Not retired from meaning, not waiting for purpose, not invisible. Her eyes glistened. You're right. I got used to thinking of you as background, someone who'd always be there. I will always be here, I said, but not for free. Her laugh broke through her tears. You're impossible. No, I said, I'm necessary. We sat in silence for a while, sipping tea, both of us letting the truth stretch its legs. Then she picked up the pen I'd placed beside the papers. What happens if I sign it? She asked. Then you've learned, I said. And if I don't? Then I'll frame it, I said with a small smile, and hang it in the hallway as a warning for anyone who mistakes patience for permission. She stared at me for a long second before bursting into real laughter, the kind that breaks the tension instead of feeding it. You're a legend, she said, shaking her head. I'm just an old woman with a working brain and a spine that hasn't retired, I said. When she finally stopped laughing, she wiped her eyes, picked up the pen, and signed her name with exaggerated flourish. Then she added a small heart beside it. There, she said, my first grown-up agreement with another grown-up woman. Welcome to adulthood, I said. As she was leaving, she paused at the door, looking back at me with something gentler than guilt. Thank you, she said, not just for the kids, for this, for making me see it without hating me for it. Hate is heavy, I said. I travel light these days, she smiled. You know, I think I'd like to bring the kids over this weekend, just for lunch. I'll cook. Bring takeout, I said, and a good attitude. Deal, she said, and stepped out into the late afternoon light. I watched her car drive away, slower than usual this time. Then I turned back toward the table, the signed paper still sitting there, warm from her hands. I folded it neatly, slipped it into the envelope again, and placed it in the drawer beside my husband's old letters. Because someday I knew the grandkids would grow up and ask what wisdom looks like. And I wanted something tangible to show them. Proof that you can teach boundaries without bitterness, that kindness can raise its voice without shouting. The move was done, and it was perfect. The next morning dawned sharp and cold, sunlight slicing through the fog like it had something to prove. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the phone rang. The display flashed David's name, but when I answered, it wasn't his voice. It was hers. Did you talk to my supervisor? Vanessa's tone wasn't angry. It was something else, tight, trembling, like a rope pulled too far. They called me in, said they had a conversation with you. I did, I said calmly. We discussed schedules, boundaries, and respect. You made me look careless, she said, voice breaking between defensiveness and guilt. I didn't make you look anything, I said. I told the truth. If the truth feels heavy, it's because it hasn't been lifted in a while. Silence. Then, you cost me a promotion, Helen. I closed my eyes for a long moment. No, Vanessa, I saved you from climbing a ladder that was leaning on the wrong wall. There was breathing on the other end, uneven, angry, maybe even scared. I can't believe you'd meddle in my career. I didn't meddle, I said softly. I reminded your boss that a leader who forgets her own home isn't leading. She's escaping. The line went dead. By afternoon, David arrived. He didn't knock. He never had to. Mom, he said, standing in the kitchen doorway, jacket half unzipped, face full of conflict. She's furious. She says you humiliated her. I told her what happened, I said, setting down the dish towel. And I did it in my own voice, soft, steady, and true. He ran a hand through his hair. She's saying you went behind her back. I turned toward him. No, David. I walked in front of her, because if she keeps treating people like tools, someone will have to show her where humanity starts. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then sat heavily in the chair at the kitchen table. You're not wrong, he said finally. You're just blunt. Age removes the need for sugarcoating. I said. I've spent my life softening the truth for people who didn't deserve the comfort. Not anymore. He looked up at me, and in that look, I saw a boy who used to hide behind his mother's legs when life got too loud, and a man who now needed her strength to quiet his own storms. "She's scared, Mom," he said quietly. "She said everyone at work knows now." "Then maybe they'll stop calling her perfect," I said, "and start calling her human." He didn't argue. He just nodded slowly. "I think she'll come by tonight. She needs to talk." "Good," I said. "So do I." When evening came, I left the porch light on. She arrived right at dusk, hair pulled back, no makeup, eyes rimmed red. She didn't storm in this time. She stood on the threshold like she wasn't sure she belonged. "Come in, Vanessa," I said. "The kettle's still warm." She followed me into the kitchen and sat where David had sat earlier, folding her hands on the table like a student waiting for a lesson. I poured tea and sat across from her. "You hurt me," she said finally, voice trembling. "Not just professionally, personally." "I know," I said, "and it wasn't my intention to hurt you, only to stop letting you hurt yourself." She blinked, confused. "Hurt myself? How?" "By thinking that asking for help is weakness," I said. "By treating love like labor. By confusing silence with agreement." Her chin trembled. "I thought you didn't mind." "That's because I've always been kind," I said, "and kind people are easy to mistake for convenient ones." Tears started rolling down her face, quiet and unannounced. "I've been awful to you," she whispered. "I talk about work-life balance all the time, and I didn't even see the imbalance in my own home." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Seeing it now is what matters." She nodded slowly. "They reassigned me at work. I'll have fewer travel projects. Honestly, I think it's a blessing." "It is," I said. "A smaller world leaves room for better things." For a long time, we sat in silence, her with her guilt, me with my peace. Then out of nowhere she said, "Do you think I'm a bad mother?" "No," I said firmly. "You're a tired one. Tired people forget to look around. The best thing you can do for those kids now is rest and remember who you are." Her shoulders relaxed for the first time in weeks. "I don't know how you stay so calm." "I've lived long enough to learn that storms end," I said. "And when they do, you either rebuild or you repeat." Vanessa let out a shaky breath. "I don't want to repeat." "Then you won't," I said. Later, David joined us. He stood by the door, unsure whether to speak. Vanessa turned to him before I could. "I owe your mother an apology," she said. He looked between us, eyebrows lifting slightly, as if he'd walked into the end of a movie he hadn't believed would have a happy ending. "You're forgiven," I said before he could respond, "because forgiveness is for the giver as much as the receiver." Vanessa smiled faintly. "You know, I think I needed this more than I knew." "Most people do," I said. "Respect is like oxygen. You don't miss it until it's gone." David reached out and squeezed my shoulder, and in that moment I knew the distance between us had healed too. He'd seen me not as the fragile old mother who needed help, but as a woman who still knew how to teach without raising her voice. Vanessa stood, eyes wet but clear. "Can I come back tomorrow? Maybe we can make dinner together." "Bring the kids," I said. "They've missed you," she smiled. "They've been asking about frogs and forts and banana bread. Apparently, Grandma's house is better than any hotel." I laughed. "That's because love doesn't need Wi-Fi to work." That night after they left, I stood by the window watching the porch light flicker softly in the breeze. I thought about the long road that had led here. Every compromise, every swallowed word, every quiet act of patience that had stretched me thin. It had taken 1 week, a few phone calls, and a simple contract to remind me of something I'd almost forgotten. Growing old doesn't mean fading out. It means shining steadier. Tomorrow would bring new beginnings. And I knew what came next wasn't confrontation anymore. It was restoration. Tuesday morning came soft and golden, like the world itself had decided to whisper instead of shout. The sun crawled lazily through my kitchen window, falling in strips across the table where 3 mismatched mugs waited for company. I'd set them out on purpose. One for me, one for Vanessa, one for David. This wasn't just coffee. This was peace, freshly brewed. I heard the car before I saw it, the low hum of tires crunching gravel, a car door shutting gently, not slammed like old times. Then a knock, light, almost shy. I smiled. "She's learning already." "Come in," I called. Vanessa peeked her head through the door first, followed by the children, who barreled in with the kind of joy that erases tension before adults can bring it back. Mia wrapped herself around my legs, giggling. Leo handed me a folded piece of paper covered in marker hearts. "It's us," he said proudly. "You, me, and Mommy." I opened it. He'd drawn us all under a big sun with the words "Family always wins" scrawled at the top. For a 5-year-old, it was perfect theology. "It's beautiful," I said, kissing his forehead. "You should be an artist." "I am," he said, deadly serious, then ran off to find the cat. Vanessa smiled, that small, uncertain smile people wear when they're trying to rebuild something fragile. "I brought muffins," she said, lifting a paper bag. "Not homemade. I'm not there yet." "They're round and edible," I said. "That's enough effort for any morning." She laughed quietly and sat down at the table. For a few moments, we just existed. The clink of spoons, the sound of kids playing, the smell of blueberry muffins that didn't care where they came from. Peace felt like an old song we'd finally remembered the tune to. When the kids wandered into the living room, I poured her a refill and said, "So, how are you?" She looked down at her cup, tracing the rim with her thumb. "Lighter. Embarrassed, but lighter. I think that's progress." "It is," I said. "Embarrassment is the first step toward awareness." I used to tell my library students that. They thought I was talking about grammar. She smiled faintly. "I keep thinking about what you said, about love not being labor. And you're right," she said. "I used to believe that asking for help was proof I was overwhelmed, that if I couldn't do everything, I was failing. I turned people into safety nets I never thanked." "You can't pour from a bucket that's already full of guilt," I said. "The trick is to pour from overflow, not obligation." Her eyes glistened again, and she reached across the table. "You really don't know how much I needed you to say that." "I do," I said softly, "because once upon a time someone said it to me." She blinked. "Who?" "My mother-in-law," I said. "She was sharper than a church bell and twice as loud. I was you once, running, proving, forgetting. She stopped me the same way I stopped you, by refusing to keep my chaos alive. It made me furious, and then it made me grow." Vanessa laughed quietly through her tears. "Guess we're both recycling wisdom." "That's the point," I said. "If every generation gets a little better at love, the world gets quieter in the right ways." She leaned back, nodding slowly. "I've been thinking about work, too. I used to think success meant travel and titles. But last night I came home early and made spaghetti with the kids. Mia said it was the best dinner she ever had. It was just noodles, Helen. Noodles. But she said it like I'd built her a castle. "Children don't measure effort in hours," I said. "They measure presence in heartbeats." She covered her face for a moment, laughing at herself through tears. "I don't know how you make everything sound like scripture." "I'm just old," I said. "And old people repeat what's true until someone younger finally listens." Around noon, David came by, tie crooked, smile unsure. He kissed my cheek, hugged Vanessa, and gave me a look that said thank you without saying it. We sat on the porch, the three of us, watching Mia and Leo chase bubbles through the sunlight. Their laughter floated across the yard, clean and unbothered. "I talked to your boss," David said quietly to Vanessa. "They told me you handled the reassignment with grace." "I didn't really have a choice," she said, sipping her tea. "But I think I'm okay with it. Maybe I needed a smaller circle. Fewer flights, more grounding." He reached over and squeezed her hand. "We've all been spinning too fast. I listened to them talk, and it felt like listening to spring happen. Slow, subtle, necessary. Sometimes the best thing an old person can do is stop explaining and let silence do the teaching." When the kids ran up to the porch, Mia climbed onto my lap, all elbows and sunshine. "Grandma," she said, "Mommy said you're the boss now." I laughed. "No, sweetheart, I'm just the keeper of the rules." "Same thing," she said with complete conviction, and David nearly choked on his coffee laughing. Vanessa smiled, watching her daughter with eyes full of something soft. "She's not wrong." "No," I said, "she's not." As the afternoon stretched out lazy and golden, Vanessa helped me clear the table. The kids had collapsed on the couch, the cat stretched between them like a furry referee. The house felt full again, but not chaotic, balanced. It reminded me of how it used to sound before my husband passed. Laughter echoing from room to room, the kind that stays even after people leave. "You know," Vanessa said as she rinsed the dishes, "you could have yelled or kicked me out or ignored me, but you didn't." "Yelling makes noise," I said. "Truth makes change." She looked at me, smiling softly. "And you've still got a way of making it sound easy." It isn't, I said. It's just worth it. She nodded, turning off the tap. I'm sorry again. Not for the week, but for the months before it. All the small ways I didn't see you. I forgive you, I said. That's how peace starts. Someone forgives before it's requested. She dried her hands on a towel and took a deep breath. Do you think we can start over? We already have, I said. You're here. That's how it starts, by showing up. When they left that evening, the sun was dipping low, turning the world copper. Vanessa hugged me tightly. No performance, no guilt, just warmth. See you this weekend, she said. I'll bring the honey for the agreement. Bring the honey, I said, smiling, but keep the respect. That's the sweeter part. She laughed and waved as the car rolled down the drive, the kids waving out the back window. I stood on the porch until the sound faded, the quiet returning gentle and earned. Inside, I sat down with my tea, wrote one final line in my notebook, and closed it softly. Peace isn't something you find. It's something you enforce with kindness. The lesson was complete, and it didn't need a test to prove it. 3 weeks passed like soft pages turning in a book I didn't know I'd been writing. The house felt lighter now, not because it was empty, but because every sound inside it had meaning again. The clock ticked without loneliness. The kettle sang without impatience. Even the old floorboards stopped creaking like complaints and started sounding like conversation. Peace, I realized, doesn't shout. It hums. The phone didn't ring much those days, and when it did, it wasn't for favors. It was for company. Vanessa called twice a week now, not to ask, but to share. Sometimes she'd put Mia and Leo on speaker, their little voices tumbling over each other to tell me about school or the garden or the new grown-up rule Mommy had made, that they had to say thank you before bedtime. I told her that sounded like a wise rule. She told me she stole it from me. I told her all good wisdom is borrowed. David called more too, sometimes from his office just to check in. He'd start with, "You busy?" and I'd tease, always, even when I wasn't. I could tell the week had softened him too. His voice carried less worry, less guilt. I could hear peace living there now, the kind that stays after you finally stop trying to please everyone. One evening, right before sunset, Vanessa dropped by unexpectedly. She had that look, nervous but smiling, like someone holding a confession they were finally ready to release. I hope it's okay I came, she said at the door. You brought dinner? I asked, eyeing the covered dish. Of course, she said, laughing. Lasagna. Don't ask how much sauce is on your oven mitts after. Then come in, I said. Anyone bearing food has already been forgiven. She stepped inside, and it was easy. No tension, no old ghosts between us. She moved like she'd lived here before. She set the dish on the counter, unwrapped it carefully, and said, You know, every time I come here, it feels like the house exhales. It does, I said. It recognizes people who mean their words now. We ate in the living room, plates balanced on our laps, laughter scattered between bites. At one point, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope, the kind you'd use for birthday cards or second chances. I wrote something, she said. I thought about the contract, about how fair it was, even when it hurt, so I made my own version. I raised an eyebrow. Oh? She handed me the envelope. Inside was a single page, handwritten, no signatures, just a few neat lines. Grandma Helen's respect agreement. I will never assume love equals obligation. I will ask, not expect. I will remember that the woman who raised my husband raised my example, and I will always bring dessert. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my tea. Now that's a document I'll sign. She grinned, eyes shining. I thought you might. I got up, went to my desk, and found a pen. We both signed it, right there on the bottom of the page, like two women finishing the same story from opposite sides of time. Then she said something that caught me off guard. You know, Helen, before that week, I used to think wisdom was just what old people had because they had nothing left to do. But you showed me its work, its effort. You chose to be wise when it would have been easier to be angry. I smiled, feeling the warmth rise up from somewhere deep in my chest. Wisdom is just experience with manners, I said, and anger is loud. I've learned truth carries farther when it whispers. She nodded slowly. You've changed how I see family. I used to think it was about help. Now I know it's about honor. I reached across the couch and squeezed her hand. And I've learned something too, I said. What's that? That growing old doesn't mean fading out, I said softly. It means shining steady enough for others to find their way." She swallowed hard. "You're something else, Helen." "I'm just old," I said with a wink. "And I've lived long enough to mean what I say." After she left, I walked her to the door, watched her taillights disappear down the street, and felt the kind of quiet that doesn't need company to be full. I turned off the porch light, locked the door, and leaned against it for a moment, thinking about how life has a way of giving you new chances disguised as problems. The envelope she'd written lay on the table, catching the faint moonlight from the window. I picked it up, smoothed it with my hands, and tucked it into the same drawer as the first contract, the one she'd signed weeks ago. 2 lessons, 1 drawer. I figured that was good bookkeeping for the soul. I poured myself a final cup of tea and carried it to the porch. The night smelled like lilac and rain and closure. Somewhere far off, a train whistle echoed, that long, low note that always sounds like a story ending and beginning at the same time. I thought about my husband then, about how proud he would have been to see the family stitched back together without shouting, without ultimatums, just steady truth and love wearing work clothes. The stars blinked awake above the tree line, and I whispered into the quiet, "Respect doesn't retire, it just changes hands." The wind rustled the trees in agreement. The cat brushed against my leg, and for the first time in a long time, I realized I wasn't just living alone. I was living right. I took a sip of tea, smiled at the night, and said softly to no one in particular, "You do nothing," they said. "But look what nothing built." And inside the house, a clock ticked on, steady, faithful, proud, keeping time for a woman who had finally taught peace how to stand up for itself.